Hi everybody and welcome to another episode of Nakatomi Test Kitchen. I am your kitchen tester, Kelly Nakatomi, and today we're going to be making a very traditional Japanese dish that's been around for generations. Today we're making Nikujaga, and Nikujaga literally translates into meat and potatoes. Niku literally means meat. In this case, it'll be beef. Jaga is the shortened version of Jagaimo, which is like your traditional baking potato that you would find in Japan. In the States, I guess they would easily translate into like a russet potato, but for today's recipe we're actually going to be using two kinds of potatoes just because I like the texture difference between the two kinds, and that's just a personal preference. It's not necessarily what you see like a traditional Japanese recipe which would only use just the one kind, just the russet kind of potato if you were here in the States. So let's get started. In a rice cooker, and this is another rice cooker dish. You can make this over direct heat on a stove using a saucepan, or a soup pot. But I found that making it in a rice cooker, not only is it easy because it's kind of a set it and forget it kind of recipe. If you've seen my Daigaku my university potato recipe, you can see how potatoes are easily made in these rice cookers. But again, this is one of those set it and forget it things. But also I found that if you make it in a rice cooker, the potatoes don't kind of fall apart. So they're kind of intact. And because it's kind of steamed rather than boiled in this broth in a rice cooker, not only do you use less broth, you end up with a dish that is, I don't know, to me a little bit more flavorful than making it on in a pot over a stove. My mom would probably be upset hearing that because she used to make it over, just regular heat, old school, in a saucepan. So, but I think that she would have really liked this recipe. So, in the internal cooker pot for a rice cooker, you're going to put in half of a russet potato, and in my case I'm also adding a little bit of Yukon Gold potatoes. So you want to have like the equivalent of two potatoes at the end. If you only have russet potatoes or you only have Yukon Golds, then just use that. I've already cut these up and let them sit in water. You know how I like to soak my cut up pieces of potato in water because it kind of releases some of the extra starch that comes from cutting a potato, which can kind of make things gummy. And it also doesn't make things turn different colors before you cook them. So you can kind of tell in this pot you've got the russet potatoes, which are like super pale and white, and then you've got these Yukon Golds, which are like a creamy yellowy color. So we're going to be using both. And I cut a little bit more than I needed to, but that's never a bad thing because then you have cut up potatoes for other dishes later. And you're also going to add, okay, so in the traditional recipe it says half a carrot, but carrots are different sizes. So if you have, and it also depends on whether you even like carrots. If you're somebody who doesn't really like carrots, then don't put a lot of them in. I personally like cooked carrots, so I'm going to be putting in a little bit more than extra, especially in this dish. The potatoes and the carrots cook up so soft and they're so good. We're also going to be adding half of an onion. So this is just a regular Vidalia onion because I tend to like sweet onions. But you can substitute any other kind of onion that you would like. And this just gets peeled. Let's see. And then what you're going to do is you can go ahead and cut the tail end off, the root end off, and then you're going to cut this in quarters. And then just by hand, you're going to kind of break this up. If there's any like weird skin things going on, you can remove those. But you're not going to be chopping these because you kind of want, you know, like the bigger pieces to kind of chomp onto. And then if you happen to see some larger pieces like this, you can always kind of go back and cut those in half. But you want to avoid just putting like, you know, a whole half onion in there just by itself. Like you want to kind of do the labor of breaking these up. And once you have kind of your root vegetables, you know, this is really no different from like an American stew. In terms of ingredients, there's nothing super special about these. And then we're going to be adding, this is 100 grams, which is like 3.5 to 4 ounces of really thinly shaved beef. So in Japan, this is kind of like one of those dishes that you would make with like leftover beef that you would have somewhere else. You could actually go to the store and buy a specific cut of beef called komagire, which means kind of like the leftover pieces after beef has been sliced for things like shabu shabu and sukiyaki. As I've mentioned in other dishes, shabu shabu is a thinner cut than sukiyaki because sukiyaki has to cook longer. But in all honesty, to me, it's kind of the same. I tend to prefer in dishes like this a shabu shabu cut because it's a thinner sliced beef, which I think ends up being softer in your mouth when you get these little pieces later. And you can kind of tell how thin these slices are, which means it's going to cook up really, really quickly. And you're not depending on like a huge cut of beef to cook down like you would for like a beef stew. And I'm only kind of tearing these pieces by hand only because it'll just make it easier for presentation later. So you don't have these like really large slices of beef in there, even though they're not very thick. You just kind of want to make sure that it's kind of spread all over, because then as the rice cooker does its job, then like the beef juices and the drippings and all that beef yumminess kind of ends up settling to the bottom of the pot. Let me go wash my hands, put some of these dishes away, and I will be right back to talk about how to add the flavor agents before we start cooking this. I'll be right back. And we're back. So this yummy, uncooked, yet to be cooked bowl of potatoes, carrots, onions, and beef, which is, I guess, the same as a pot roast, but the meat is a little thinner sliced, and the flavoring is going to be a little bit different, as you can tell in just a moment. So to this, we're going to be adding our traditional Japanese pantry ingredients. So we're starting with a bottle of sake that I can't open. Oh, there we go. Okay. You can see how how little I use this. I only use this for cooking. So we're going to do half a tablespoon of sake. I'm going to do a full tablespoon, excuse me, of mirin, which is the sweetened sake. It's like a fortified sweetened sake, which will add a little bit of shine to the dish. Not quite as shiny as like when I made the sweet potatoes, where I used sugar. And you're going to add 1.5 tablespoons of soy sauce. And then you're going to add 1/2 tablespoon of sugar. Again, this is not a sweet dish. This is a savory dish, but because it's like a traditional Japanese flavor, there's a hint of sweetness that actually then adds to the umami. So that's what that's for. You're also going to add 1/2 cup of water, which ends up being it's like 120 cc's of water if you're doing Japanese measurements, but it ends up being like 1/2 cup of just regular water. Pour that all over the top. And then you're also going to add 1/2 tablespoon of dashi powder, dashi powder is a kind of a dehydrated Japanese fish stock, which is made out of kombu seaweed and bonito flakes. And it adds a little bit of fishy flavor, but we're not looking for a fishy flavor here. We're just adding just a little bit of extra kind of Japanese umami to the dish. And this is it. You don't necessarily need to mix this all together because it will kind of cook it all together in the pot. But if you would like, you can kind of stir it all together before you put it all in. To me, the end result's kind of been about the same. You're going to go ahead and put this into your rice cooker pot, close it up, and you're actually going to cook this on the regular white rice setting, and you're literally going to set it and forget it. So we'll be back in about 40 minutes and I'll show you what the end result looks like. And we're back. We've let the rice cooker cook through, and it rang its little magical bell when it was done, like 40 minutes later, which gave me time to do other things like laundry, answer messages, that kind of stuff. So let me go ahead and open this up. It smells, the whole house smells so good. Oh, look at that steam coming out. I don't know if you can see very well, but it's so, I mean, honestly, it just looks like a pot roast, but because of the Japanese flavors that we've used to flavor this dish, because of the mirin and the soy sauce, it doesn't taste like a traditional pot roast, but it'll be ingredients in terms of like vegetables and meat that you recognize. So go ahead and some onto a serving dish. This is traditionally served as part of, this is like the main course of a Japanese dinner, which usually has like a bowl of rice and some miso soup and then maybe some pickles and 3 or 4 maybe other things, but this will probably be like the main because this is vegetables and meat. But honestly, you know, it's meat and potatoes. You've got carbs and starch and meat and protein and all of that in here. Ooh, in here. Which I think to me means you can kind of eat this as just like an entire meal by itself. The flavor is incredibly light. It's not a heavy, it doesn't taste, it's not like a teriyaki beef or anything like that. Set this aside. And I'm going to give this a taste. Just, these are the kinds of dishes that remind me of home. This is comfort food, Japanese style. So, yeah. And obviously this is like steaming hot right out of the rice cooker. This is fantastic at room temperature. This is great as like a little bento ingredient for the next day. This is also really decent cold, you know, because all the flavors are already seeped into all the potato pieces and all the carrots and everything. So mm. Okay, that's the Yukon Gold potato. It is creamy, it's buttery, so good. I'm gonna try a little bit of the Russet, the regular Jagaimo. Mm. It's amazing how different potatoes have different textures and different flavors. The Russet is fluffy, but it's also full of flavor, but it doesn't have that kind of that butteriness that a Yukon Gold does. That's my favorite. But the traditionalist in me goes for the Jagaimo. Has to be included in there somehow. Take a little piece of this meat. Mm. It's so, it's light, but also very, very flavorful. Um, Now, some families in Japan will add a couple of other ingredients to this. They will add konnyaku, which is like shirataki, which you've seen me use in my low carb japchae and sukiyaki dish. But it is a zero carb, kind of like a filler noodle that you can also add to this if you'd like. I've left it out just because not everybody likes shirataki. And if I'm going to be making this for other people, I tend to leave it out unless I've asked them. And most people who are Japanese will be like, yeah, throw that in there. But many non-Japanese people kind of avoid it. Mm. The carrot is soft, is sweet in that kind of natural carroty way. This is absolutely delicious and is a perfect lunchtime meal for me. So I'm going to go and have the rest of this for my lunch. I hope you enjoyed watching this episode of Nakatomi Test Kitchen. I am your host who keeps trying different things. And I don't know. There are a couple other rice cooker recipes that I want to try. Um, and once I've gotten a handle on how to do those correctly, then I'll turn that into an actual episode. But if there's something that you are thinking, wonder if you could make it in a rice cooker, you should like let me know. There's actually a very popular TV show in Japan at the moment that's hosted by a J-pop band member from back in the day. He's now, you know, retired from J-popping. But he is doing this show now that's specifically not a rice cooker, but the old school rice cookers, not electrical. And basically, fans send in recipes of like, hey, you should make your why don't you try putting these ingredients in, those ingredients in, and they actually have like a weekly contest, and that's super popular in Japan at the moment. I am not trying to repeat that, but maybe they're like American dishes or Western dishes that I can see if maybe I can make them in an actual electric rice cooker, because I am a big fan of just kind of pushing a button, letting it do its job, and so I can then go off and do other things. So if you have any ideas, let me know. Otherwise, stay tuned for another episode coming up soon. I'll see you next time. Bye.